Naomi Pierce paused just inside the cabin doorway, the soft whoosh of pressurized air barely registering against the steady beat of her own confidence. She had flown in and out of first class more times than most people could count. But today, she carried more than just luggage. In the crook of her arm rested a slim leather portfolio embossed with her company's monogram, Pierce Influence Media. At 56 years old, with decades spent negotiating billion-dollar branding campaigns, she knew exactly how to command a room and a cabin without saying a word. The first-class cabin of Aether Air Flight 728 felt like its own private sanctuary. Plush cream-colored panels absorbed sound, while overhead reading lights cast a warm glow on brushed metal accents. Leather seats in muted dove gray curved around every passenger's personal space, and built-in monitors gleamed with previews of upcoming Cannes Lions sessions Naomi had been invited to keynote next week. 3 rows of face-high seats stretched forward, each one angled to offer maximum privacy and even better views through the oval windows. Naomi's heels clicked softly on the carpeted aisle as she advanced to seat 1A, the throne of this small kingdom. A discreet placard on the armrest confirmed her reservation. 1A, Naomi Pierce. Around her, other passengers adjusted neck pillows or scrolled through in-fleet menus, but when she settled into her seat, sliding in with the practiced grace of someone who has spent countless hours in high-stakes boardrooms, each head turned for a fleeting second, not out of rude curiosity, but because presence like hers held attention by default. She tucked the leather portfolio into the overhead bin, then retrieved her custom-stitched tote bag. Inside were the essentials: a tablet loaded with her presentation deck, a slim notebook for last-minute notes, and a pair of noise-canceling earbuds that matched her black blazer. She fastened her seatbelt, the light click echoing softly, and leaned back. Through the window, the tarmac at JFK slipped away, replaced by layers of clouds glinting in the midday sun. The flight attendant approached on silent tread. Becky Langford, according to the crisp name tag pinned above her heart. Langford offered a polite nod and a clipped, "Good afternoon, Ms. Pierce. Welcome aboard." Her voice was neutral, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of assessment as they passed over Naomi's designer silk blouse, the single strand of pearls at her throat, and finally rested on her dark skin with thinly veiled appraisal. Naomi greeted her with a calm, measured smile that didn't invite familiarity, because she didn't need it. Langford moved on to the passenger in 1B, a middle-aged business consultant who flashed a grin and asked for a glass of Dom Perignon. Naomi watched the exchange in the corner of her eye, noting how the consultant's shoulders relaxed at Langford's accommodating tone. She didn't begrudge him that moment. Her focus lay elsewhere, on the small margin that separated honored guest from afterthought. She reached for the in-flight menu clipped to the armrest. The page above, Standard Selections, listed 3 premium meals: lobster thermidor, wagyu beef tenderloin, and a vegan truffle risotto. She traced the names with her fingertip, a ritual that reminded her of the power in pre-ordering, of being recognized and remembered by a system built to serve. In less than 15 minutes, those dishes would arrive at her seat, delivered by Langford or one of her colleagues. At least, that was the plan. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the last time she'd been in a situation like this. Not on board a flight, but in a boardroom where her ability was casually downgraded because of her gender and race. The memory still stung. The executive from a prestigious agency who'd whispered, "I didn't expect the founder to look like you." She could summon anger, but that would play into the hand of those who thrived on spectacle instead. She had learned long ago to wield her silence as steel. A chime from the speaker above signaled the start of the meal service. Naomi opened her eyes and watched as Langford reappeared, clipboard in hand. The attendant's smile was professional, but Naomi sensed the underlying routine in her step. "Ms. Pierce," Langford began, "I'm afraid your lobster thermidor is unfortunately not available today. We only have the turkey club sandwich and a fruit plate." Time seemed to pause. Naomi's breath remained steady. Her heart did not skip. Around her, a murmur rippled through the cabin, vehicles of concern and mild surprise. Passengers exchanged glances, trying to process how a reservation could fall through for seat 1A. Langford held out the menu again, as if suggesting, "Perhaps you'll find something else to your liking." But in her tone lay the unmistakable implication, "You don't really belong here." For a split second, Naomi tasted bitterness. Not at the sandwich, but at the slight, at the casual dismissal. Then she set the menu aside without a word. Her eyes narrowed minutely as she looked back at Langford. Calm, measured, unbroken. She lifted an arm and pressed the call button with deliberate slowness. The soft ding was almost hidden, but within Naomi's mind, it resonated like a starting gun. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out her tablet. With fingers that had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, she navigated to the internal dashboard of Pierce Influence Media, her life work, her tool for change. The screen flickered to life, showing a live feed of every one of the cabin's built-in monitors alongside campaign data for EtherAir. Her index finger hovered over the Override Flight 728 switch. She tapped it once. Just like that, every screen in the first-class cabin went dark. The soft hum of conversation dropped into an inquisitive hush. A second tap, and a new message, her own creation, flashed in bold white letters on a black background. Luxury is not about food. It's about who you choose to serve. No need for camera lights, no need for applause. Naomi leaned back again, closing her eyes. She had spoken through action, letting the moment carry the weight of her intent. Above the clouds, in the quiet of seat 1A, she had asserted a truth no apology could convey, and in that stillness, her presence rang louder than any words ever could. Becky Langford moved down the aisle, with the kind of professional efficiency that comes from years of repeating the same motions. She carried a silver tray balanced perfectly in one hand, her other hand clasping a small, leather-bound service order. Her eyes flicked over Naomi Pierce, seat 1A, just as surely as they did over every passenger. But there was something different in the way she paused, something almost imperceptible, as if she'd caught sight of an unexpected note in a familiar melody. "Good afternoon, Ms. Pierce," Becky said, her voice as smooth and controlled as ever. She placed the tray on the fold-out table in front of the man in 1B, who smiled and politely accepted a crystal flute of Dom Perignon. "May I offer you today's special lobster thermidor, followed by the Wagyu beef tenderloin?" Her tone suggested genuine regret at the very notion of inconvenience. Naomi lifted her gaze, her expression courteous but reserved. She had already anticipated this question, and her answer was ready. "Yes, please," she replied, her voice calm and even. She slid the menu closed, careful to keep her movements slow, deliberate, controlled. In her mind, she traced the itinerary for her keynote speech in Cannes. 3 pillars of modern branding, each illustrated with case studies from Fortune 500 companies. No mention of hospitality etiquette, no hint of emotion. Her focus was flawless. But Becky's smile tightened. A flicker of something unspoken passed across her features. She flicked her eyes to the service order in her hand, gave a small, polite nod, and turned her back on Naomi. The gentle click of her heels receded down the aisle, and for a moment, Naomi wondered if she'd imagined it all. A soft ding sounded above the cabin, the official start of meal service. Naomi glanced around. In row 2, Mr. Harding raised his glass in a silent toast to his companions. 2 seats over, a young couple exchanged quiet laughter over a shared bottle of Chateau Margaux. First class was in full swing. Fine china, folded napkins, crystal glassware, and embroidered linen. It was a private world of luxury and ritual. And Naomi, by every measure, belonged here. Yet something was off. The predictable choreography of first-class dining felt incomplete. Naomi's tray remained closed, the menu clasped in her hand. She watched Becky reappear, clipboard in hand, her face the picture of professionalism, until she spoke. "Ms. Pierce," Becky began, her voice steady, "I'm afraid we're out of lobster thermidor, and unfortunately, we've run out of Wagyu as well." Naomi's hands stilled. She blinked once, registered what Becky had said. Around them, the cabin continued its soft, rolls of bread, the clinking of cutlery, polite conversation, but time had slowed for Naomi. "I'm sorry," Naomi said, perfectly composed. "My reservation was sent 2 weeks ago, and I received a confirmation." Becky's lips curved into a practiced, apologetic smile. "I understand, ma'am. The system did confirm your order, but today we've had an unexpected shortage in premium provisions. We have turkey club sandwiches, chicken Caesar wraps, or a selection of fruit and cheese." She held the menu out to Naomi, waiting. The gesture should have been innocuous, a benign offering of alternatives, but to Naomi, it felt like a page torn out of an old discriminatory playbook. The turkey club sandwich, an economy class afterthought, was unworthy of seat 1A. It was a deliberate downgrade, a message dressed up as a simple logistical hiccup. Naomi closed her eyes for a heartbeat, centered herself. She heard the slight rustle of Becky's uniform as the attendant shifted her weight, the faint scrape of glass on glass as a steward refilled another passenger's champagne. She gathered her thoughts, then opened her eyes and looked at Becky. Her voice was soft but firm. "I'll have the turkey club, thank you." No tremor, no bitterness in her tone, just a statement of fact. The moment held a quiet tension. Becky gave a curt nod and stepped away, her face carefully neutral. Naomi watched the attendant's back retreat, noted the subtle tilt of her head as she passed a white male passenger who'd ordered the caviar course. She'd seen variations on this moment before. A door held a fraction of a second too late, a name mispronounced in a meeting, an introduction skipped over in a crowd. Today it was a sandwich. Naomi reached into her tote bag and retrieved her notebook. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote 2 words in neat, precise script. Turkish Club. She paused, underlined it twice, then drew a single line down the middle of the page. Beneath it, she sketched a quick grid, mapping out the cabin layout, Becky's path, and the position of each screen. A ritual of control and preparation. Her method for turning a moment of slight into a catalyst. She didn't look around. She didn't seek sympathy. As the door to the service pantry closed behind Becky, Naomi tapped her pen quietly. Every action, every note, was recorded in her mind like data points. A record of behavior, of choice. The tray arrived moments later. Turkey club sandwich carefully plated on fine porcelain, crisp lettuce peeking out, alongside a bowl of mixed berries. A tall glass of chilled water stood to one side. The presentation was immaculate, but to Naomi it was a reminder. The system still saw her as a problem to manage, rather than a valued guest. She picked up the sandwich, turned it over in her hands, then placed it back on the plate without a sound. Her eyes returned to the notebook page. In that quiet act of refusal was her resolve. She would not pretend this was an accident. She would not let a cold sandwich be the final word. A second chime sounded, signaling that dessert service was about to begin. Naomi closed her notebook, fastened the pen in its loop, and leaned back in her seat. She let out a slow, controlled breath, her gaze drifting to the window, where sunlit clouds stretched endlessly. She raised her tablet, thumb poised over an icon marked Global Campaign Control. A single finger tap, and the course of the next few hours would be set. And the message would be clear. But Naomi kept her arm down a moment longer, savoring the tension, her calm presence, a silent testament to what was coming. In first class, luxury was supposed to mean choice, comfort, respect. But as the cabin lights glowed softly around her, Naomi Pierce chose to let the system speak its own failure to serve. And she knew that silence, when wielded like a scalpel, could cut deeper than any outburst ever could. The cabin settled into a quiet hum after the trays clattered into place in every other row. In 1A, Naomi Pierce sat perfectly still, the plush, dove-gray leather seat cradling her like a silent witness to everything she'd endured. Around her, fine china and crystals sparkled under the soft amber glow of the reading lights. White-gloved hands moved like clockwork. A fresh bread roll here, a polished wine glass there, but her own tray, bearing that carefully plated turkey club, felt like an island in a sea of indifference. The world around her appeared in perfect focus, but for Naomi, it all blurred into one clear idea. She was the only one who didn't truly belong. She reached out and brushed a fingertip over the edge of the porcelain plate. The lettuce was crisp, the bread toasted just so, technically flawless. Yet every element of this meal proclaimed this is not your standard. The gap between her seat and those of her neighbors felt wider than the aisle itself. In 1B, Mr. Harding laughed at a joke from his companion, swirling champagne in a crystal flute. 2 rows back, a couple clinked glasses over Wagyu that melted on the tongue. No one paused to ask, "Are you all right, Miss Pierce?" No one offered a substitute of equal weight. Naomi's chest rose with a controlled breath. She could almost feel Becky Langford's practiced gaze sweeping across the cabin, searching for cues, deciding whose needs mattered most. That gaze had passed over ordinary luxury travelers and landed on her with the flicker of something dismissive. Today, the world around her moved in perfect rhythm, but she'd been out of step from the start, first with the menu confirmation that vanished, then with the silent question of whether she was one of them. Now, the only heartbeat she heard was her own, drumming softly against the polished veneer of this so-called sanctuary. She allowed herself a moment to notice the details, the napkin folded into a perfect pyramid, the faint aroma of truffle oil lingering in the air, the low murmur of flight attendants intercoming meal requests. Each detail shouted comfort and care. Yet comfort and care were luxuries Naomi had to earn constantly, luxuries others assumed came automatically. A silent question flickered through her mind, echoing the cabin's emptiness around her. Why is this still a fight? Her eyes drifted to the window, where layers of golden clouds stretched to the horizon. What looked like an endless expanse of salt and pepper sky felt more like a cage. Beautiful, serene, and utterly isolating. Somewhere above the Atlantic, she sat alone in her bubble of privilege and prejudice. The sight should have been calming, instead it sharpened her resolve. She wasn't here to indulge in pretty views or polite conversation. She was here on a mission, to reshape an entire system that told women like her they didn't belong. A faint clink of cutlery snapped her attention back to the tray before her. She lifted the sandwich in both hands, examined the layers of turkey, lettuce, artisanal bread. It reminded her of a childhood memory, her grandmother pressing homemade cornbread into her palm, telling her she deserved more than anyone ever gave her. Back then, Naomi had believed in the kindness of strangers. Now, she believed in the power of strategy. She settled the sandwich back onto the plate, untouched. Food was sustenance, but this tray was a proposition. Accept the insult, or turn it into your foothold. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the cabin's hush fill her senses. No rushing laughter, no snatches of overheard gossip, just the soft ticking of the service clock. A single passenger couple 2 rows over continued their hushed laughter, unaware of the tension rolling off Naomi in subtle waves. They could taste the vintage wine. She tasted disappointment. They could feel the cloud-soft pillows. She felt the weight of expectation, and yet, in that moment of crystalline clarity, Naomi felt something else, a profound calm, like the eye of a storm. Drawing in another measured breath, she opened her notebook, her ritual for moments when silence spoke louder than protests. She turned to a fresh page and, with precise strokes, wrote, "Observation, seat 1A, privilege denied, opportunity created." Beneath it, she sketched a small map of the cabin and a flowchart of the screen networks she controlled. She didn't need to fret over anger or indignation. Those were distractions. What she needed was data and leverage. Every glance Becky gave to her neighbors, every pause before addressing Naomi, became a data point. And Naomi intended to use those points to orchestrate a reckoning so precise it would leave no room for denial. When she finally leaned back and tucked the notebook away, her posture remained relaxed, an invitation for no one. The soft cabin lights haloed her silhouette, turning her stillness into its own kind of statement. Luxury was meant to comfort, but for Naomi, it was now a stage. The crook of her arm held the tablet that would deliver the next act. And as she traced the gentle curve of the window frame, she allowed herself a fleeting, fierce smile. She understood how this story would end, not with a shout or a spectacle, but with a message that could never be ignored. Around her, the cabin resumed its rhythms. But Naomi Pierce was no longer just another passenger. She was the catalyst. And in that suspended, spectacular silence, she prepared to let the system speak its own failure and her own power. Naomi Pierce let the cabin's hush wash over her as the final crumbs of the Turkey Club sandwich sat untouched on their china plate. In that quiet, her mind drifted back to the very first time she'd felt that same sting of invisibility. Only back then, it hadn't been a stewardess who'd dismissed her, but a room full of boardroom executives. She was 26, fresh out of Stanford, when her startup's prototype AI security platform earned her an invitation to pitch before a panel of venture capitalists. Naomi had rehearsed her spiel until every statistic and chart felt like second nature. She entered the glass-walled boardroom in a crisp pencil skirt and blouse, only to find a well-dressed man at the mahogany table, addressing her assistant rather than her. "Can you bring me coffee?" he'd asked, without looking up, as if she could not possibly be the presenter. Naomi paused at the door, then in measured calm replied, "I'll bring it myself if you'll let me finish my presentation afterward." The room went silent. And she did present. By day's end, she'd secured their first $2 million 0-cent seed round. That was the day she learned that respect was never given. It had to be claimed. Years later, at 32, Naomi found herself backstage at a Cannes panel, this time as a keynote speaker. The VIP entrance glowed under a neon sign, but when she handed over her credentials, a uniformed attendant cocked his head. "You're not on the list," he said. She flashed her invitation, her name printed in bold letters. He shrugged. "Procedures are strict." The velvet rope stayed down, colleagues waited inside, cameras rolled. Naomi drew a slow breath, fixed her posture, and walked past him anyway, her voice calm but carrying steel. "I'm Naomi Pierce. Let's make sure you know that." Security stepped aside. Later, on stage, she joked about learning the difference between a hatchet job and a hat trick. The audience laughed, but she knew that even applause couldn't erase the slight. Then there was the time at 40, when Naomi's firm was up for a Fortune 500 branding award. Journalists wrote her story as an example of diversity in tech, until a reporter asked on camera, "Do you think your success is due to gender quotas or merit?" Naomi's lips curved into a polite smile as she answered, "Merit is doing 3 times the work for half the credit. But I'm happy to share my platform so the next generation doesn't have to keep score." Clips went viral, but not without sparking thousands of commenters who believed she'd gotten a leg up from diversity programs. She watched the flurry of DMs, some supportive, others snide, and she realized every well-crafted statement still let others define the narrative. She vowed she'd rewrite the story in her own terms, one action at a time. Each of these memories tied into a larger pattern, polite facade, hidden bias, and the unspoken rule that women like her had to prove their worth tenfold. The slight moments she'd dismissed as business as usual had piled up, shaping her into someone who refused to be sidelined. And here she was again, on Flight 728, Seat 1A, the pinnacle of privilege, yet facing the same scripted dismissal. A soft glow from the monitor beside her reflected on her face, reminding her of the technology she controlled. The same tech that streamed her firm's global campaigns could just as easily replay these flashbacks for an audience of 100 high-paying passengers. That thought carried a delicious symmetry. The very system that had wronged her, in small ways and big, was now at her fingertips. She leaned forward, closing her eyes, and let the cabin's vibrations anchor her back to the present. The memory of the journalist's query, the attendant's shrug, the VC's offhand coffee request, all of it condensed into a single moment of resolve. Naomi had come to terms with the fact that her voice alone wasn't always enough. She had the data, she had the technology, and she had a plan. In that stillness, she envisioned the exact sequence: screens in every first-class seat flickering, passengers shifting in their plush leather chairs, eyes widening as the story unfolded. Her story, but also everyone else's who had been quietly diminished. She saw Becky Langford frozen mid-step, the practiced smile slipping as her own words were broadcast across the cabin. "We're out of your meal," now echoing back at her in a new, unignorable context. Naomi inhaled deeply, feeling a surge of clarity. This wasn't just about a sandwich. It was about dismantling the small injustices that, stitch by stitch, wove themselves into a larger tapestry of exclusion. It was about ensuring that the next time a black woman sat in Seat 1A, no one would ever again question her right to be served at the same level. With her eyes open, she reached for the tablet resting on the armrest. Her thumb hovered over the screen, tracing the digital outline of the override Flight 7828 command she'd set up days ago. She'd spent nights fine-tuning the code to ensure a seamless broadcast. The override would play a 20-second clip, a montage of her flashbacks, woven with the simple message, "Luxury isn't about what you serve, it's about who you value." She paused for a heartbeat longer, honoring the weight of each memory, each slight that had shaped her silent ascendancy. Then, without a flicker of hesitation, she tapped. The tablet sank back into standby, and Naomi leaned back, arms folded. The reverberation of her decision pulsed through her as surely as any applause would have. Quieter, perhaps, but infinitely more potent. Above her, the cabin lights dimmed for the next service. Below her fingertips, the system lay primed for the exact moment she wanted. In that charged silence, Naomi Pierce wasn't merely recalling her past. She was setting the stage to ensure it could never be repeated. And somewhere between the clouds and the cabin's hush, her silent storm began to gather momentum. Naomi Pierce let the porcelain plate of untouched Turkey Club rest on its stand as she reached into her tote for the tablet that had become her most powerful ally. In the hush of first class, the soft glow of the screen felt almost intimate. She tapped its edge once, then twice, and the Pierce Influence Media login page appeared, familiar as her own reflection. Around her, the cabin's gentle hum continued, a whisper of seatbelt clicks, the distant slam of an overhead bin, a muted laugh from 2 rows back. But Naomi heard only the steady thrum of her own resolve. Her thumb swiped across the login field, entering credentials she'd memorized long ago. A biometric scan confirmed her identity, and the dashboard sprang to life. There it was. Ether Air Global Experience Campaign, $45.00. M Media Buy. The very initiative she'd negotiated and built. Beneath it, a live feed showed miniature icons of every first-class monitor on Flight 728 lounge screens, gate displays, even the VIP lounge at Nice Airport. Each icon glowed green, signaling live status. Naomi studied them for a heartbeat. Every one stood ready to serve the airline's brand narrative. Until today. She scrolled down to the Override Controls section. Designed originally for urgent troubleshooting, the menu listed options: adjust volume, reset network, and the one she sought: suspend live display, flight override. She paused, glancing up at the darkened windows where sunlight filtered through the clouds. This was her moment to convert a personal slight into an industry-wide statement. With a single tap, she could pull the rug out from under the airline's polished facade. Her fingertip hovered over the Suspend Live Display button. Beneath her calm exterior, her pulse quickened, just enough to remind her that power could be thrilling in stillness. She pressed down. A confirmation dialog popped up. Confirmed suspend. This action will remove all live media content on Flight 728. This cannot be undone mid-flight. A second tick of her thumb and she tapped confirm. The prompt vanished. Immediately, icons shifted from green to gray. On the tablet's miniature grid, each monitor blinked off, one after another, like a row of candles snuffed out by the wind. In the cabin, the change was instantaneous. Monitors around her went dark, their images replaced by blank screens. The soft glow of her tablet was the only light for a moment. A hush fell over the first-class cabin, more complete than any airline dimming its lights for dinner. Naomi felt the tension hangs in the air. A pregnant pause before the next act. Passengers shifted, eyebrows rose, and polite murmurs rippled through the rows. A steward glanced at a male passenger in 2A who shrugged and peered at his monitor, then handed his champagne to a comrade. Becky Langford paused mid-stride, her silver tray balanced perfectly in one hand. Naomi watched Becky's shoulders hitch ever so slightly, a crack in the mask of professional composure. The cabin crew exchanged glances, uncertain whether this was a technical glitch or a deliberate man. In that moment, Naomi's choice spoke louder than any apology or explainer. She closed the app and tucked the tablet back into her tote with the gentlest of motions, as though she were placing a fragile heirloom on a shelf. Her breathing stayed slow, deliberate, the way she'd trained herself in meditation sessions at the Manhattan studio, an exercise in staying present under pressure. Naomi let the silence envelop her without fear. She tapped the armrest, lifting her head to meet the eyes of her fellow travelers. No words passed between them, but they all felt it. The cabin's narrative had shifted. For the first time, luxury felt tinged with uncertainty. That was her quiet victory. Naomi knew her audience, women who had lived through unspoken slights, who understood that true power didn't need noise, just precise action. She imagined their nods of recognition. Yes, that's how you change the game. Her chest swelled, not with pride but with solidarity. This was her statement. You can break the script without raising your voice. A soft ping announced an incoming message. Her assistant Aaliyah, on standby. Naomi glanced at the notification. 211 of 211 screens confirmed offline. Standby for clip. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The groundwork was laid. She'd taken the first blow, the reconnaissance strike that would set the stage. Now all that remained was to follow through on the promise she made when she pressed that button, to let the system expose itself. Rising slightly in her seat, Naomi leaned back against the headrest. The carriage lights dimmed for the next service phase, and she felt the vibration of the cabin feed into her bones. In seat 1A, She had transformed from guest to orchestrator. With one silent command, she had illuminated the truth of exclusion by creating a void in what was supposed to be an unbroken tapestry of luxury. And in that void, her power radiated brightest. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the stillness and the knowledge that her plan was unfolding exactly as she intended. Then, almost imperceptibly, she straightened her shoulders and locked her gaze forward. Naomi Pierce didn't need to speak. She had already spoken. And as the plane continued its glide toward Cannes, the screens that once showcased the airline's prestige now served as a canvas for her rebellion. A rebellion that, in its silence, spoke volumes. Naomi Pierce sat back, breathing in the soft hush that followed the cabin's sudden blackout. The relief flight path hummed beneath her. Blankets of cloud spread out forever beyond the window. Around her, first-class passengers glanced at dark monitors, exchanged curious looks, but Naomi felt none of the restlessness. She had pressed the first button. Now it was time to let the system speak. She reached into her tote and produced the slim, graphite-gray smartwatch she wore like a bracelet. Aaliyah Grant's contact blinked on the small screen. "Aaliyah, stand by." Naomi tapped once. In the dim light, the watch vibrated against her wrist. Up the links of the discrimination protocol. Flight 7408 Sequential flight. Patron in override. Confirm in 2. Her words, compressed into 37 characters, carried a promise of upheaval. She slipped the watch back under her cuff and exhaled slowly. The cabin seemed to hold its breath alongside her. Naomi remembered the first time she'd worked with Aaliyah on a midnight code push for a Fortune 500 client. They'd sat side by side in a Manhattan office at 3 a.m., fueled by espresso and dry humor, stitching together algorithmic defenses that later protected millions of data records. Aaliyah had been the eager junior analyst then. Now she was Naomi's most trusted aide and the gatekeeper of Pierce Media's most sensitive operations. If anyone could turn a simple clip into an airborne revolution, it was her. 1,500 miles away, in the glass-walled operations center on 58th Street, Aaliyah's desk was cloaked in the glow of monitors. She tapped the notification. Upload discrimination protocol to Flight 708 cabin network. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. A secure portal flickered open, and lines of code streamed down her screen as the clip, an 18-second montage Naomi had commissioned weeks ago, encrypted itself for airborne playback. Aaliyah confirmed each step. Ingest video file, tag it for override, allocate display parameters, and finally sync to the satellite link routing through Ether Air's partner servers. Within 90 seconds, Aaliyah shot Naomi a brief acknowledgement. 211/211 screens loaded. Ready for broadcast? No flourish, no celebration, just 2 words. All set. Naomi's lips curved into a quiet smile. The first salvo was complete. Back in the cabin, Naomi felt the familiar tug of anticipation. She imagined those tiny monitors coming alive, one by one, each passenger's eyes widening as they recognized a story they'd never expected to see at 30,000 feet. This was more than embarrassment for Becky Langford. It was a statement on the invisible lines drawn around privilege, on the subtle ways people like Naomi were dismissed. A soft ping from her smartwatch confirmed Aaliyah's message. Naomi tapped the screen to open the custom Pierce Media Override app. The dashboard displayed a live schematic of the cabin, Seat 1A through 1C, 2A through 2D, each icon pulsing with readiness. She scrolled to the Broadcast button. For a heartbeat, she lingered there, savoring the power of a fingertip. Then, with perfect calm, she pressed Play Discrimination Protocol. Instantly, the cabin's screens flickered. The soft hum of conversation cut off mid-sentence. A minute later, each monitor burst into life with a silent video. A split screen of Becky's clipped apology, "I'm afraid we're out of your meal," juxtaposed with scenes of caviar service and winking steward hands serving champagne. The montage played in deliberate slow motion, the text overlay reading, "This is exclusion. This is invisible bias at its finest." The final frame held for 5 seconds longer. Luxury isn't what you serve, it's who you choose to see. Gasps, murmurs, the shuffle of bodies leaning forward. Naomi observed it all without a flicker of surprise. In the seat directly behind her, a retired executive with silver hair pulled at his collar. A fashion editor clutched her champagne flute as if bracing for impact. Becky, caught mid-courtesy bow to another passenger, froze. Her lips parted, eyes wide, as the video looped back to the opening frame. Naomi's heart remained steady. She'd anticipated this exact moment, the collective realization that the cabin's curated comfort was not universal, but conditional. She allowed herself a brief nod of satisfaction. The narrative had shifted from simple inconvenience to unavoidable reckoning. A steward hurried up the aisle, tray forgotten in hand. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" she asked Naomi, voice tinged with confusion. Naomi met her gaze, unflinching. "Everything is exactly as it should be," she replied softly. Then, as if remembering her manners, she tapped the steward lightly on the arm. "I'll explain after landing." The steward blinked, uncertain but respectful, and hurried away. Around Naomi, the screens began to cycle. Passengers replaying clips, sharing phone flashes with their neighbors, recording the moment for social proof. The cabin atmosphere transformed from polite serenity to electric tension. In that charged air, Naomi felt a kinship with every silent witness. They were connected by a shared truth, now broadcast into their laps. Minutes later, the clip ended, and each screen faded back to black. The cabin lights brightened for dessert service, but no one moved for pastries. Becky Langford stepped forward, tray refilled, her composure strained. Her voice, when it came, was small. "Ms. Pierce, is there anything else I can get you?" The words hung like an afterthought. Naomi looked up, her amber eyes cool and precise. "Nothing you can't find," she said, voice low but carrying to the aisle. "This is just the beginning." She shut off the override feed on her tablet and slipped it away. The cabin crew exchanged awkward glances. Some passengers applauded softly, others sat in stunned silence. But none of it mattered. The point had been made. In the quiet that followed, the world had changed, not with a roar, but with an undeniable click of a button. Naomi leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief meditation on power's true nature. The screens had spoken. Now it was time for Ether Air's leadership to listen. And somewhere above the clouds, in the perfect stillness of Seat 1A, Naomi Pierce settled into the calm after the storm she'd built, knowing her next move would be informed by every moment of this flight's silent revolution. The tires of Ether Air Flight 728 screeched against the tarmac as the plane touched down at Nice Côte d'Azur. Seatbelt signs blinked off, and a soft buzz of relief rippled through first class, until reality snapped back into focus. Naomi Pierce remained motionless in 1A, her posture composed, eyes locked ahead. She'd already set the storm in motion. Now she was ready for the aftermath. As the cabin crew released the latches on overhead bins, Naomi slipped her tablet into her tote and smoothed the front of her tailored jacket. Around her, passengers chattered about ground time and baggage claims, but her world had narrowed to 2 people stepping forward at the jetway door. First came Vincent Duval, Ether Air's regional director for Southern Europe. His crisp navy suit and polished shoes hinted at decades of corporate diplomacy. His expression, however, was unreadable. At his side stood Elise Martin, head of HR for Aether Air France, her arms folded, lips pressed tight. They bowed their heads in sync as Naomi rose effortlessly to her feet. "Mrs. Pierce," Duval began, voice low enough that only she could hear over the din of deplaning, "We apologize for the earlier incident." His words stumbled, unpracticed. Naomi inclined her head, her features smooth, betraying nothing. "Pull the remaining contract," she said, voice calm but resonant, "and clean your culture before I ever consider coming back." Duval's jaw tightened. Elise's eyes flicked to Naomi's hand resting on the tablet strap, still echoing the weight of her command. No one else in the cabin heard her, but their collective attention felt palpable. In that moment, Naomi owned the dock. Without another word, Naomi stepped aside, gliding down the aisle with the serene certainty of someone used to being obeyed. Passengers watched in silence. Those recording on their phones lowered their devices, sensing the gravity of what they'd witnessed. No one clapped, no one gasped. It was as if the cabin itself acknowledged that Naomi had spoken through action, and now demanded the company do the same. A few feet behind her, Becky Langford, still in crisp uniform, silver tray abandoned at the last seat, frozen mid-step. Naomi caught Becky's wide-eyed stare for the briefest instant. Fear, shame, confusion. The steward beside Becky stammered, "Miss Langford," but Becky couldn't move. Her professional composure had cracked, and Naomi's single line had done what glare or confrontation never could, shattered it. They reached the jetway threshold. Naomi paused, looking back at the cabin one final time. "Thank you for your service," she added in an almost inaudible murmur, an echo of politeness used now as steel. Then, she stepped off the plane. Inside the jet bridge, Duval intercepted her. Elise hovered at his shoulder. The corridor lights cast long shadows, and Naomi felt the cool, conditioned air of corporate crisis management. Duval cleared his throat. "Miss Pierce, we'll comply immediately. The contract withdrawal is at your command. HR will handle Miss Langford's conduct." Naomi met his gaze, a silent assurance that she'd hold them to every word. "Good," she said, voice quiet but firm. "I expect written confirmation within the hour and public acknowledgement by tomorrow." She turned and descended the steps toward the terminal, each click of her heel amplifying the statement she'd made. Behind her, Becky was led off the plane through the rear exit by two stern-faced HR officers. The cabin lights flickered as the doors closed, and for the first time in Aether Air history, an entire first-class crew disembarked without a single bow or farewell. Passengers spilled into the jet bridge, murmuring among themselves, "Did you hear that? She didn't even raise her voice. That was incredible." In the terminal, Naomi passed under the bright boreal lamps of Nice Airport. A small entourage of VIP staff waited, a driver holding a limousine door, a junior PR associate clutching a tablet. Naomi walked past them without haste, her stride steady. She was more than their most important passenger. She was now an agent of change. Moments later, Duval and Elise emerged from the plane's rear doorway, guiding Becky toward a small sectioned-off area marked Employee Review. Becky's shoulders sank. Her practiced smile had vanished. She looked back once at Naomi's receding silhouette, eyes brimming with a mixture of anger and regret. Naomi glanced over her shoulder, offered a single, cold nod, and disappeared into the stream of travelers. In the quiet lobby beyond customs, Naomi paused to collect herself. She tapped her smartwatch. Aaliyah's name appeared. Naomi sent a concise message. Contract paused. HR action underway. Media outlets notified per protocol. Her thumb tapped send. The watch vibrated confirmation. As Naomi slid the watch back under her cuff, her phone buzzed. Multiple alerts. Flagged, Aether Air, contract withdrawal notice, and Flight 728 incident response. Headlines were already drafting themselves in newsroom backends. Black CEO shakes airline to its core. Silent revolution at 30,000 feet. Naomi allowed herself a small, knowing smile. She'd orchestrated every step. The meal glitch, the cabin blackout, the screen broadcast, and now this public reckoning. But she wasn't done. Not until Aether Air's board and corporate HQ felt the full weight of systemic change she demanded. She stepped into the waiting limousine, sliding onto the leather seat as the door closed softly. The driver handed her a sleek envelope bearing the Aether Air logo. Inside, a formal notice of contract suspension, HR meeting schedule for the crew, and an invitation for Naomi to consult on corporate culture reform. Naomi glanced at the envelope, then out the tinted window at the sun-drenched terminal concourse. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself for the next phase, taking her story public on her own terms, shaping the narrative so that no one, passenger or executive, could ever again question who belonged in seat 1A. As the limousine eased away, Naomi pulled out her notebook and jotted a single line. And in that neat script, she saw the arc of her silent revolution, from plate to platform, from insult to industry-wide introspection. The twist was set in motion, and there was no turning back. Demeanored Pierce stepped out of the limousine in front of the Hotel Martinez's grand entrance, the April air still carrying a hint of Mediterranean warmth. She paused under the ornate portico and slipped her phone from her blazer pocket. Aaliyah Grant's name blinked on the screen, a silent sign that the next phase of Naomi's quiet revolution was unfolding. Initial report delivered. They're mobilizing HR and legal. Waiting your go-ahead for next dossier. Naomi's thumb hovered over the reply field. She thought back to the dozens of anonymous feedback forms she'd commissioned from past flights, passengers who'd felt invisible, disrespected, bypassed. Today, it wasn't only Becky Langford's cold shrug. These patterns ran deeper, woven into the very fabric of the cabin culture. She tapped out 2 words: send everything. Within moments, Aaliyah answered with a secure link. Dossier Crew Bias Incidents. Naomi opened it to reveal a succinct list of 4 senior cabin crew members, Becky plus 3 colleagues, each tagged with multiple service discrimination flags over the past 18 months. The report summarized passenger complaints, ignored call button repeatedly, addressed other passengers by name, never this guest, selective offering of amenities, overt deference to white male travelers. But the real kicker was the enclosed video footage. Naomi clicked play, and the cabin's camera view flickered on her phone. There was Becky, her professionally rehearsed smile fixed, pouring champagne for Mr. Radcliffe like a personal butler. The wine glass caught the overhead light as she straightened her posture, her eyes never drifting toward the woman in 1A. A second clip showed another attendant, Claire Monahan, silently scoffing when a black guest requested extra pillows. Then she turned, immediately engaging a white passenger in an animated handshake. Naomi watched each frame absorb into her memory. She felt no flare of anger, only a steady, resolute disappointment. These weren't one-off mistakes. They were the quiet refusals of respect that chipped away at her sense of belonging. She closed her eyes for a beat, breathing in the mix of sea breeze and jasmine drifting up from the promenade. Then she opened her eyes and hit forward on the dossier, sending it to 3 addresses: the Aether Air CEO, the head of global HR, and the chair of the Service Ethics Board. Her message was brief. Full evidence attached. These patterns require urgent action, no exceptions. Naomi slipped the phone back into her pocket and lifted her head to the hotel's revolving doors, where a bellman looked ready to offer his assistance. But Naomi didn't need help. She didn't need anyone to carry her bag or speak her name. She walked inside with the same calm assurance that had powered every step of her journey so far. Meanwhile, across the terminal plaza, social media had already ignited. Hashtags like Seat1A Justice and Aether Air Bias trended in real time. Clips of the blackout and the 18-second broadcast looped endlessly, each share amplifying the revelation that the insult wasn't isolated. It was systemic. Naomi had transformed her personal slight into a collective mirror, forcing an industry to confront its own blind spots. In the hotel's private lounge, Naomi found a quiet corner overlooking the Croisette. She settled into a leather armchair, her portfolio resting on a side table. A glass of sparkling water arrived. No request needed. She let its cool bubbles ground her. Around her, executives in tailored suits and designers in avant-garde dresses flicked through magazines or tapped on tablets, oblivious to the storm Naomi had unleashed. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line under the header: "Discrimination is no longer invisible when you choose to shine a light on every shadow." Naomi paused, pen hovering. She felt the same calm ferocity that had carried her through every flashback, every slight. This was no longer about one tray of food or one frozen smile. It was about ensuring that no other Black woman or any marginalized guest would ever feel that professional invisibility again. She closed her notebook and looked out at the glittering Riviera sunset. Above the pale horizon, Naomi knew the real reckoning was just beginning, and she was ready to see it through. Aether Air's global headquarters felt uncharacteristically tense that afternoon. In a sleek glass tower overlooking the Seine, CEO Charles Duval stared at his laptop as Naomi Pierce's dossier and contract suspension notice popped into his inbox. The subject line, "Full evidence attached. These patterns require urgent action, no exceptions," had arrived with such gravity that Duval immediately called an emergency board meeting. Within minutes, conference lines linked offices in Geneva, New York, and Singapore. White-gloved assistants distributed printouts of passenger complaints and the silent video evidence Naomi had forwarded. By 3:00 p.m. Paris time, the executive boardroom was full. Duval at the head of a long ebony table, flanked by the heads of HR, legal, and global service operations. Duval cleared his throat and clicked to display the first slide, a still frame of Becky Langford's clipped apology, next to footage of champagne flowing for other passengers. The room fell silent. "This isn't a one-off error," Duval said quietly, eyes scanning the faces around him. "It's systemic. And it's right here in first class. We cannot let this define our brand." Legal counsel adjusted his glasses. "From a liability standpoint, we need immediate suspension of any crew involved pending full investigation. We'll draft the public apology, but we also have to show real change." HR head Elise Martin nodded, tapping her pen. "We'll roll out mandatory unconscious bias training for every cabin crew member, first class through economy, within 30 days, and create a direct feedback channel so VIP complaints bypass the normal triage." Behind them, Duval watched his colleagues' determination grow. The board was united in making Aether Air the model of equitable service. Within 2 hours, Aether Air's communications team drafted and approved an immediate press release. Aether Air acknowledges the unacceptable treatment of a valued customer on board Flight 728. We sincerely apologize to Ms. Naomi Pierce and to any passenger who has felt excluded in our cabins. Effective immediately, we are suspending the 4 senior cabin crew members involved pending full review and launching a comprehensive service equity initiative, including mandatory bias training, a direct VIP feedback line, and the establishment of an independent cultural advisory board. The release also included an invitation for Naomi Pierce to join as the inaugural member of that new advisory board, a role that would give her direct input on policy, training materials, and long-term service culture reform. By 5 p.m., the statement was circulating on every major wire service: Bloomberg, Reuters, Associated Press, each carrying the headline, "Luxury Airline Confronts Bias. Naomi Pierce Invited to Lead Reform." Back in Cannes, Naomi was settling into her suite at the Hotel Martinez when her phone buzzed with a new email notification. She recognized Duval's signature line immediately. Opening the message, she found a brief but sincere apology followed by, "On behalf of Aether Air and our entire organization, I personally apologize for the discrimination you experienced. We are committed to making meaningful changes and would be honored if you would serve as chair of our new Cultural Advisory Board. Your leadership will help us ensure that no traveler ever feels invisible again." Naomi leaned back against the plush velvet headboard, letting the words sink in. She pictured the boardroom in Paris. White walls, black table, Duval's earnest face, and the resolve she'd sparked among executives who until yesterday had been oblivious to their own blind spots. She tapped reply once. "Thank you, I accept." And she meant it. Within minutes, social media exploded. The hashtag Seat1A Justice began trending, alongside Luxury for All and Aether Air Listens. Clips of the cabin blackout and the discrimination protocol broadcast looped endlessly, attracting millions of views. News outlets ran features exploring the implications, how a single black woman's calm, precise action had unraveled an entire system of subtle bias. Op-eds appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, and Forbes, all praising Naomi's method and Aether Air's swift response. Late that evening, Naomi joined a small virtual welcome call with Duval and Elise Martin. Faces lit by soft screens, they spoke of next steps: drafting advisory board charters, mapping training modules, and setting timelines for implementation. Naomi contributed 3 bullet points on the call: direct, actionable, informed by the dossier of service gaps she and Aaliyah had compiled. Duval thanked her for her clear vision and unwavering commitment, and Naomi closed her laptop, feeling the familiar, quiet thrill of systems bending to her will. She set the laptop aside and gazed out over the Mediterranean's dark expanse. Below, the lights of the Croisette twinkled like tiny confirmations that change, once set in motion, rippled outward. Naomi allowed herself a satisfied smile. She hadn't needed to raise her voice, stage a public spectacle, or plead for attention. She had simply let the facts speak, and they spoke volume. Before turning in, Naomi took a moment to open her notebook one last time that night. Under, she wrote, "Occasionally, you have to break the illusion of perfection before people will address the cracks beneath." She underlined the sentence twice, then closed the notebook. In the calm darkness of her suite, she knew the hardest work lay ahead, ensuring Aether Air followed through on its promises. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, confident that a silent catalyst had sparked a transformation no press conference ever could achieve. The system had spoken, and Naomi Pierce was listening. Naomi Pierce awoke before dawn to the faint orange glow of her phone screen. She'd barely opened her eyes when the notifications cascaded in. Hundreds of Twitter alerts, Instagram tags, WhatsApp messages. Even before caffeine, the world had begun to echo her invisible revolution. She sat up in the Hotel Martinez suite overlooking the Riviera. The balcony doors stood open to the cool Mediterranean breeze. On her nightstand, her phone vibrated again. This time, a breaking news banner on CNN. Black CEO's mid-flight rebellion sparks global outcry. Below it, a ticker scrolled through trending hashtags: Seat1A, Revolution, Luxury for All, blank screens speak. Naomi let the headlines wash over her without clicking. She didn't need the details. The gist had already permeated every feed. Instead, she reached for her tablet and pulled up a grid of real-time data from Pierce Influence Media's social listening dashboard. Within 3 hours of Flight 728's landing, 47,000 posts had used Seat 1A Revolution. 89% of them were expressed as solidarity statements from passengers and industry insiders alike. In dozens of Instagram stories, travelers had snapped photos of darkened monitors mid-meal, a child in 14C holding her mother's hand to point at the blank screen, a silver-haired banker in 2A scowling at his turned-off iPad, a stewardess documenting the very moment screens shifted from ads to Naomi's phrase. Luxury isn't about what you serve, it's about who you choose to see. She paused, tracing that line on her tablet as if reading a poem. She remembered the hush in the cabin, the way mouths fell open, no gasps, no shouts, just collective realization. And now that realization had rippled into a digital tidal wave. Across platforms, opinion editors were weighing in. The New York Times ran a front-page feature titled, "When Silence Became Protest: How One CEO's Button Press Upset an Empire." The Guardian published essays exploring service bias in global travel. Even niche travel bloggers, once focused on seat comfort and champagne pairings, were asking, will airlines now reconsider who they define as elite? Airlines outside Ather Air moved quickly. At 10:15 a.m., SkyVista announced a Screen Solidarity initiative. On all flights this week, first-class monitors would run a looping black screen with the message, "Everyone belongs in 1A." Jet Silver sent an email to its frequent flyer members offering complimentary upgrades to select customers of color, accompanied by a note, "No one should ever feel invisible at 30,000 feet." Naomi scrolled through these announcements, her thumb tracing each logo. She recognized the familiar pulse of industry course correction, companies that reacted out of genuine conviction, and those who chased headlines. Either way, the conversation had shifted. The walls built by casual exclusion were cracking. A soft knock at her door announced room service. Naomi closed the dashboard and tucked the tablet away. She opened the door herself, no assistant needed, and accepted a tray with coffee and croissants. As she poured the dark roast into a porcelain cup, she thought of the cabin blackout, the broadcast clip, the single line at the jetway. Each step had built upon the last, moving her from passenger to orchestrator. Back at her desk, Naomi opened her laptop to check corporate emails. Unsurprisingly, the messages from major media outlets were polite requests. Would you consider an interview? Can we film your keynote address extended segment? Please share your insights with our viewers. She paused over the first one, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Instead of a reply, she drafted a brief note to Aaliyah. Hold all interview requests. Screens are speaking. She hit send, closed the laptop, and leaned back. For the first time since boarding Flight 728, she allowed herself a moment of true stillness. Not the strategic calm of planning the next move, but a quiet exhale. No press conferences, no sound bites. She had watched the world respond to her actions without her voice. That was enough. Mid-morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting a soft glow over her notebook on the desk. She opened it to a fresh page and wrote in her own hand. Beneath it, she sketched a simple icon, a black rectangle labeled "Screen," surrounded by small speech bubble silhouettes. In her shorthand, it read, "Empty screens equals loudest message." She smiled at the simplicity. It echoed every lesson she'd learned, that power resides not in volume but in precision. A knock on the suite's anteroom door startled her. It was her PR liaison, a young woman holding 2 tablets. "Ms. Pierce, we have prepared a statement in case you change your mind on interviews." Naomi held up a hand. "No thank you, let the screens do the talking." She gestured to the empty bench by the window. "Would you bring those reports here? I want to see demographic breakdowns on the hashtag reach. The liaison paused, then nodded and complied. Naomi turned her gaze back to the sea beyond the glass. Below, the bay shimmered. Yachts cut smooth trails across the water. Above, gulls wheeled in swoops. On shore, Cannes was stirring awake. Festival banners fluttering, cafes setting out tables, and in this small pocket of the coast, a revolution had launched from a... She picked up her coffee once more and took a slow sip. The flavor grounded her in this moment of aftershock. She imagined the passengers on Flight 728 now scattered across continents, bankers, consultants, tourists, all carrying a story of exclusion and awakening. They'd logged on to meetings or hit the beach, but they all shared a digital echo, the experience of seeing privilege unravel on a screen. By midday, Naomi decided to take a walk along the promenade. She slipped on a lightweight trench and stepped into the lobby. Every concierge and porter she'd passed offered a respectful nod. The whispers of her deed had preceded her. Outside, the salty air and the sound of waves felt like a soft applause. As Naomi walked, she kept her phone tucked away. She didn't need to check trending counts. The movement was real. She saw tourists pausing at their own flight board monitors, some screens proudly displaying Seat 1A Revolution, others cycling through solidarity messages. It was a decentralized, global art installation, blank screens speaking louder than any ad ever could. She paused at a cafe overlooking the water, ordered a café au lait, and sat at a table facing the sea. Pulling out her notebook one last time, she penned a line under her header. No speech necessary. When you break the illusion of luxury, the truth speaks for itself. She closed the book, folded her hands, and watched as the world continued to turn, knowing that in its rotation, people would remember the day when screens fell silent and silence roared. Naomi Pierce didn't speak at the press conference. She didn't take an extended TV interview. Instead, late one afternoon at the Hotel Martinez's private rooftop garden overlooking the glittering Côte d'Azur, she invited 3 young women of color to join her at a small round table shaded by a striped awning. No cameras, no flashbulbs, just 4 women, the sea breeze, and the promise of honest conversation. Each guest arrived carrying her own story. First was Simone Carter, a 24-year-old journalism student from Chicago who DM'd Naomi after seeing clips of the Flight 708 broadcast. Simone described the countless times she'd been spoken over in class, her byline passed to someone else, her questions answered only when she rephrased them for a white peer. Next was Alicia Mendoza, a 29-year-old marketing associate working at a small boutique agency in Madrid, who'd watched Ather Air's screens fall silent on her sister's flight to New York and felt a surge of vindication. Finally, there was Priya Shah, a 27-year-old travel blogger based in London who'd collected stories of subtle bias, being seated last for room service, having her name mispronounced, being assumed less knowledgeable about destinations she'd researched exhaustively. They settled into woven chairs around a low wooden table. Naomi poured each of them a glass of sparkling water and joined them, her posture relaxed but purposeful. The sky was the soft gold of late afternoon, and the distant hum of the city felt like applause. Naomi looked at each woman in turn, making direct eye contact, an unspoken acknowledgement that their experiences mattered. Simone spoke first, her voice quiet but firm. "I've covered conflict zones and corporate scandals," she said, "but I've never felt so sidelined as when I pitched a story on my own community. People assume I'm just the local intern." She paused, her shoulders rising in a small shrug. "Watching what you did up there," she gestured toward the sea, "I realized I could change the narrative without asking for permission." Alicia leaned in. My agency told me to tone down my pitch for a luxury brand because they thought our audience wouldn't relate to a Latina voice. But when I saw Aether Air's monitors go dark, I thought, maybe they're the ones who need to rethink who they serve. She sipped her water. I want to learn how to push back. Not angrily, but effectively. Priya smiled, a flicker of relief in her eyes. I document hidden gems around the world, but I'm always the last to get credit, she said. Your action made me see that the system can't ignore me if I know its flaws, and use its own tools. Naomi listened without interruption, her expression both attentive and empathetic. When each had spoken, she set her glass down and folded her hands. Her voice was measured, warm, but carrying the weight of experience. Thank you for sharing, she began. You've articulated what so many of us feel, this persistent whisper that maybe we don't belong. But here's what I learned. Systems don't change because people shout at them. They change when you show them what they're doing. She reached into her tote and pulled out her notebook. Flipping to a page marked, she read aloud the single line she'd written earlier. Silence is hollow only when you leave the screens empty. Fill them with undeniable truth. Simone nodded. You let the blackout speak for you. Naomi smiled. Exactly. I didn't need to fight Becky Langford at her level. I simply used the platform she thought would never feature me. Alicia asked, but what about the backlash? Aren't you worried about retaliation? Naomi leaned back. I've faced it before. When a journalist implied my success came from diversity quotas. When a VC asked if I was here to fetch coffee. Each slight was a data point. I compiled them, then I used them. That's how you protect yourself, turn every tiny insult into evidence. Priya scribbled notes. So, it's research as resistance. Naomi nodded. Research and strategy. With every slight, you map the system's weaknesses. Then, you recalibrate its optics. My blackout was a brief pause in the narrative. The next step was the broadcast, and then the boardroom reckoning. Each move was timed, precise, and unassailable. Simone looked thoughtful. It's a long game. Naomi's eyes sparkled. A marathon, not a sprint. You win by staying in the race, and by choosing the moment to make your move. They lapsed into a companionable silence, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. Naomi sipped her water. I want each of you to think about your own platforms, she said. Simone, your byline is your broadcast. Alicia, your campaigns are your screens. Priya, your stories are your content network. Identify the pain points, the moments when doors close on you, and develop your override. Alicia's face lit up. I won't wait for permission. Priya added, I'll start mapping every instance I've been sidelined. Simone smiled, a determined glint in her eyes. And I'll report it to a wider audience. Naomi placed her hand lightly on Simone's notebook. Good. And remember, power isn't measured by volume, but by impact. A whisper can travel miles if it's timed right. And you'll never lack for timing. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that seals a pact. Naomi leaned forward. Promise me you'll keep each other accountable. Create your own advisory circles. No one should walk this path alone. They nodded in unison. Naomi stood and offered her hand to each of them. Thank you, she said, for trusting me with your stories. Now go, build your own revolutions. As they dispersed into the cooling evening, Simone back to her journalism program, Alicia to her marketing office, Priya to her hotel room. Naomi watched them go with a sense of profound satisfaction. The system she'd disrupted was only the beginning. Aether Air's culture would change, but the ripple effect would spread far beyond cabin walls. She gathered her notebook and rose, feeling the quiet culmination of 15 chapters of lived experience and strategic action. Chapter 11 wasn't about grandeur or spectacle, it was about legacy, the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. As Naomi walked down the rooftop stairs, the sky darkening into twilight, she carried with her the certainty that silent catalysts, once ignited, transform worlds. Naomi Pierce settled into her window seat aboard Global Fly Flight 412. This time, not as a paying passenger, but as an honored keynote speaker en route to the Global Leadership Forum in Singapore. She hadn't requested any special accommodations. Her reputation and the quiet might of her actions was enough. Yet as she unbuckled her seatbelt and peered down the cabin, something caught her eye. A small digital placard perched above each monitor, glowing against the darkened screens. The placard read, in simple white letters on a black background, "Reserved seat for change. We remember you, Naomi Pierce." A gentle surge of warmth eased through her chest. She glanced up at the monitor before her and, for the first time on an airplane, saw an image that had nothing to do with refreshments or in-flight entertainment. Instead, the screen displayed a looping montage, the blank cabin blackout, the 18-second discrimination protocol clip, the boardroom slide showing systemic bias, and finally, Naomi's voiceover, "Calm, unwavering luxury isn't about what you serve. It's about who you choose to." Around her, passengers smiled or nodded, as though witnessing a private affirmation. A gray-hailed woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for what you did." Naomi returned the smile with a slight nod. No one asked her to explain. The gesture spoke volumes, a universal acknowledgement that change, once seeded, could blossom in the most unexpected places. In that moment, Naomi felt the culmination of every deliberate tap on a tablet, every silent strategy, every measured broadcast. The cabin, once a microcosm of exclusion, had become a rolling canvas of inclusion. From seat 10A to seat 14C, from the eldest travelers to the youngest, the message was clear. You belong here. She reached into her tote bag and retrieved her notebook. On the first blank page, she had scribbled 12 chapter titles. The last simply read. Below it, she wrote a new line. "When you change a system from within, you create monuments of memory that no one can erase." Her handwriting was neat, just as precise as the strategy she'd deployed. She paused, then underlined those words twice, honoring the journey. From private slight to public symbol. Behind her, the flight attendant prepared the pre-landing service. In first class, the usual offerings of champagne and canapes were replaced with a single message card at each tray table. "This tray is served equitably to every guest." Guests laughed softly, sharing glances that said, "We've come a long way." Naomi realized how seamlessly policy reform had woven itself into daily ritual. What began as an 18-second broadcast had rippled across training manuals, staff meetings, and now into the tactile reality of a meal service. Luxury, at last, meant dignity for all. The plane's engines hummed in steady descent. Naomi closed her notebook and slipped it back into her bag. She looked out the window at the vast blue below, feeling both grounded and limitless. She thought of Aaliyah back in Manhattan, of Duval and his board in Paris, of the 3 women in Cannes whose lives had been touched by the quiet revolution. Each had become a steward of change in her own sphere, just as she'd intended. A soft chime signaled the cabin would soon land. Naomi straightened her jacket, not out of formality but because she liked to carry herself with the same grace that had guided her decisions. The digital placard above her monitor shifted to a final affirmation. Seat 1A, a place for every story. It was a promise and a challenge. Every traveler's story mattered, and every one of them deserved a seat where their presence was acknowledged and celebrated. As the terminal lights of Changi Airport came into view, Naomi tucked her phone away and prepared to disembark. She felt no urge to speak again in that moment. The screens had spoken. The cabin had become her loudest voice. And now, as she climbed the stairs into the jet bridge, she carried with her a legacy more enduring than any speech. Beyond the gate, a small crowd of event staff waited, delegates, organizers, and media. Naomi stepped into the bright fluorescence, her silhouette framed by the backlight of the cabin behind her. A hush fell, a respectful, anticipatory quiet. She offered a single nod to the crowd as though passing a torch. No words were needed. Her presence and the cabin's placards told the story. Inside the conference center, banners bore her name beside the motto, "Redefining Global Leadership Through Equitable Vision." She paused at the entrance, taking in the moment. A woman who'd been sidelined by a sandwich was now invited to lead global discourse on service and inclusion. It was the kind of narrative arc her younger self might have dreamed of, but never dared articulate. Naomi Pierce stepped into the auditorium and onto the stage. As the audience rose in applause, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile, one that carried the weight of every slight overcome and every system transformed. Then she raised her hand in a simple wave, an invitation rather than a declaration. At that moment, she realized the true power of her quiet revolution. It wasn't just about one cabin, one airline, or even one industry. It was about every space where people risked invisibility. And whether you sat in seat 1A, 14C, or 42F, your place mattered and would be remembered. In the hush that followed her wave, Naomi began to speak, and though her voice was measured and calm, true to her philosophy, it resonated like thunder in the minds of those who listened. Because they already knew. The revolution had already begun, and it lived in every reserved seat for change.